Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Carl. I thought I'd do something different with this video. I thought I would discuss with you and do a more face-to-face discussion on this project. As you know, I've been renovating a property that I bought here in the UK. Also thought that I would actually just kind of tell you some of the interesting things that I've learned along the way, what it was like to find contractors, what it was like to learn the history of this house and bring it to a modern state. So I thought I would take time and do that. Without further ado, let's get to it. Cue the intro. In some of my previous videos, I've talked about how this property is 120 years old. Well, that would put it in the Edwardian period. Well, after talking with the neighbors, one of the things is I learned that I was wrong, actually. This house is at least built in the 1856 because they actually showed me paperwork that said that their house was actually built no later than 1856, which clearly puts it in the Victorian age of England. So what is the Victorian age? Well, that just means that Queen Victoria was the Queen of England at the time. And what is that like? What was the time period like? As I go through this house, right, and I think about what it looked like during the current Elizabethan time that we live in right now. But then think about it. What was it like during the Victorian time? That's right in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. So all type of things are going on. Well, this house, if you think about what was life like in 1856, well, that means this house had no indoor plumbing because that would have just been for rich people. I looked online and I found that in around 1854 or 1856, somewhere in there was a big cholera outbreak or typhoid outbreak that was going down in London. And why was that? Because it was common for people to throw their, for lack of a better word, excrement out on the streets or put it into cesspools, which would then leak into the well water, and then people would drink that. And so it would make people sick. So that's what's going on in the year 1856 with this house, right? No indoor electricity, no indoor plumbing. You know, all the heat is done by the fireplaces that are in the house. So if I think about it, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4 fireplaces in the house, 2 downstairs and 2 upstairs. So that's what life would have been like then. So this house would have been built there to support the local workers or laborers who would have worked in the local factories. Hence why I call it the Rolls-Royce house, because as it is in 2021, Rolls-Royce is literally around the corner, no more than a mile. Easily you could walk to it. And as now that I sit here and think about it, there's a factory right behind the house. Like the house sits on the back of factory. So that's what life would have been like in this Victorian time. I mean, think about it. Kids would have been able to work. Women were in the house, they weren't working. Men would go out and work, you know, so the air would have been terrible, so they're polluting everywhere. I mean, it just would have been very hard working. You're talking 6 days, maybe even 7 days a week working. I don't even think there was an 8-hour work shift going on at the time. So I just thought like this was interesting stuff to think about. It made me go, what was life like in 1856? Now the house is in Derby, which is right in the East Midlands. I'll put a map up, maybe right here. And here in the East Midlands, what was going on in 1856? I looked up a couple things, and the cricket grounds were just launched, I think, 2 years later, or just opened up right around 1856. The rail stations were coming on in around 1860. So things were changing in Derby around that time. And I thought that was pretty interesting, what life would have been like in 1856. Well, let's talk more about like what this project was like. I mean, there was a point where it was just like, oh my God, what in the world did I get myself into? Because again, I said I saw this property sight unseen. I only saw 2 pictures because the auction house said that you couldn't enter the house for some reason. Tenants wouldn't allow anybody in, which we found out later was total BS, because the previous owners were slumlords basically, and really trying to get one over on everybody because they knew they had a house that needed a lot of work, and they didn't want people to see that so that people would bid even lower. Because I think that after doing this work, I paid a little bit too much. I think I should have paid another $10,000 less than what I actually had to pay for, give or take. And I mean, it was just one of those things where when all the walls are ripped down and you're looking at it, you've ripped out the bathroom, you've ripped out the kitchen, there's not a floor down, there's no carpet down, there's no laminate flooring down, there's just nothing down. You're in a building site. And I went, oh my God, what in the hell have I gotten myself into? Have I bitten off more than I could chew? And it becomes a point where you're at a building site and you have these people working with you or for you, or however you want to say it, but you know, the house starts to turn a corner. You know, the walls get plastered, they get skim coated. You know, then it's like you have to paint all those walls, all those ceilings. You start putting in the toilet, you start putting in the sinks, you start putting in the kitchen, you got your floor level, and you can start seeing that there's a pathway to getting this house done, and it's to a standard that you would want to live in, you'd feel proud of. And we're at that point. You know, there's still parts where you always want to touch up here and there. You're like, oh, I should paint this. Or you look at the wall and you're like, oh, I probably need to paint this a little bit here or there. But the house is nearly complete. You know, I would say it's 99% done. And we're just at the point where we need to sell the house. And we've had 2 viewings, I think 3 viewings today. I think we had an offer called in earlier today, which is great. It's too low, so I'm not going to accept said offer. Let's be clear, this is my first fix and flip. I own several properties right now, but those properties didn't need a full tear down to brick and then rebuild it back up to something nice and new. So it was tough. I had to find contractors who I could trust and work with, who would, you know, who I could rely on and do good work. And luckily I was able to find one. I found the contractor, I would say the general carpenter, to do most of the work. I actually found him and his buddy, Simon, at one of my other properties. I was driving around the neighborhood and they happened to be doing, I think it was a garage conversion and turning the garage into a kitchen, which what they do here. Here in the UK, you might have a garage attached to your house. Nobody parks their car in the garage. It's just a glorified box to do storage. So most people will convert the garage and turn it into another room in the house, because nobody's gonna park the car in the garage. And I got to talking to them. I had them come do a quote, come give me a quote on the property, talk about some of the things that I wanted to do, how we were going to try to modernize this house. And upon walking in the house, I mean, it was a wreck. It was absolutely disgusting. I'm talking about the floor was uneven. Literally, when you walked in the house, you have to imagine that you walk into a house, right? And it felt like you were in a Willy Wonka movie where you could tell that the house was dipping this way. And like, it felt like when you walked in, either the ceilings were getting lower or you were getting taller. It was one of those situations. And it didn't feel like it was opened. It didn't feel like it was ready for modern living. You know, I would see, you know, we saw the original flooring that was down, not the original flooring. They had laid laminate flooring down on top of carpet, which was sitting on top of cardboard. Walked into the kitchen was just a wreck. No space. It felt very claustrophobic. Everything was tight. You walked in and you just knew that this property was gonna have to be a regut. You just kind of have to get rid of everything. Because I saw this property sight unseen. The only thing I saw were 2 pictures online when I went to the auction house. And so I thought maybe I was gonna get into where I was gonna have to, you know, take down some wallpaper, paint a couple walls, maybe refurbish the kitchen, you know, maybe put a new flooring down. But I didn't expect what I got. You know, I really got a project that was, I had to gut the whole house. I literally took everything down. Every wall was just about bare to the brick. All flooring was taken up, multiple levels of flooring. The entire kitchen was gutted out. Yeah, I mean, it was real, a lot of work went into removing that stuff, taking that stuff down. Um, but luckily the contractors that I had were up for the task. So once we cleared out the house, I mean, those guys were there every day, putting the house into an order where we could start to bring it back up, which is, we had to address the ceiling. So what was wrong with the ceiling? It had what's called Artec. And so instead of trying to, Artec is like, think of like plaster or something like that, where somebody like kind of makes like a design on the ceiling. And instead of trying to scrape that down to get it flat, what we did was we just boarded the ceiling. So we just put plasterboard on top of that, fastened that into the ceiling joist. And then once that was put in place, we just put plaster or skim coated the plasterboard. So essentially we just dropped the ceiling height. We had to replaster all the walls. And then then Dave had to start doing his carpentry work, which was putting new architraves in, leveling the floor, damp-proof course. That's a big issue here in the UK, this thing called rising damp. And what that really does is it means the walls will be like wet to the touch. You can literally look at the wall and be like, there's moisture coming, rising up from the ground through the walls, which would chip your paint, chip your plasterboard, chip your, well not chip, but your wallpaper would flake off, and then you get a lot of mold in the house. So we had to address that. We had to level the flooring. What is leveling the flooring? Well, that's using a self-leveling compound that was just laid across the entire floor, and then it just finds its level. So then at the floor, so then instead of walking to the house feeling this crookedness, you could tell that it was nice and flat and level. Oh, another surprise that we ended up getting was we had to do a rewiring of the house. So we had to pay for an electrician, a Sparky, as they say here, to come in and put in new wiring throughout the house, put in fire alarms that were hardwired into the property, or into the ceiling, put in a new fuse box. So we had to put a brand new fuse box into the property because the old one just wasn't up to code. So we really did a lot of work into this house, you know. Oh, and then the kitchen, it didn't even have a place for a refrigerator. So you couldn't even plug in the refrigerator into the kitchen. So the refrigerator had to be plugged in into the front room. So imagine what that was like. There was no place to have a washing machine in the kitchen. So where are you gonna do your laundry when it's time to wash your clothes? So we made sure that when we designed the kitchen, that we made a space for a washing machine, that we made sure that we thought about modern living, that there was a place for the refrigerator. But then we had to make sure there were outlets for said refrigerators and washing machine. Things like that, things that you don't even think about. You just assume that it'd be in the kitchen. Especially if you're going in a modern house, there's clearly gonna be an outlet or a plan for where the refrigerator would be. There'll be a plan for a dishwasher or a washing machine. Those things just weren't there in this house. This house is, what is 1856 to 2021? 160 years or so? You know, it's just not there. And that's the kind of things we had to do with this house. It was a learning experience, but would I do it again is the real question. Yeah, I'd do it again. I'm looking now for deals. I'm hoping to go into auction really soon here, find another property. I want to buy 2 properties this next time if I can, because we're selling this property, but I'd like to buy 2 and then either sell 1 and hold 1. That's kind of the strategy that I want to look at and kind of deploy. So look forward to 2021, doing another project, hopefully soon. And that's really it. So thank you for listening in, and I'll see you on the next one.